Hey everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to be going over and showing you how to install the Roadmaster Crossbar-style base plate kit here on a 2022 Ford Escape. So a base plate kit is just going to be one of the many things that we need in order to tow our Escape here, and it's going to serve as the physical connection between the motorhome and our vehicle via the tow bar. Now the tow bar is specific to the base plate kit, so you want to make sure that you're choosing a pair that is compatible with one another. The Roadmaster Crossbar-style is only going to be compatible with the Roadmaster motorhome mounted tow bars. Now what a motorhome mounted tow bar is, it simply secures to the motorhome via the 2-inch hitch. So that's how you know you have a motorhome mounted tow bar. Now in addition to the motorhome mounted tow bar, you're also going to need a crossbar assembly, which is this device here. This just simply links the two sides together, and we do sell this here at etrailer that you can pick up along with your base plate kit and your tow bar. Now, if you have a tow bar from another manufacturer, such as Demco, Blue Ox, or Kurt, you can still use this base plate kit, but you will need an additional adapter. But if you have a Roadmaster motorhome mounted tow bar, there's no additional adapters required. So we have everything hooked up now as we'd be traveling down the road. But when we've arrived to our destination, we're ready to head in town, get a bite to eat. It's very easy to unhook the vehicle from the motorhome. There's actually a couple different ways we can do this. The first one would just be removing the connections for the tow bar arms here like so. Remove the clevis pin, pull out the pin, drop that down. We need to do that on both sides. Then our tow bar arms are just going to fall straight down. And then we can remove the crossbar assembly by unbolting the linch pins at the top here, just like that. Pulling off the crossbar assembly. And now we have our two removable arms on each side. So that's something great about the Roadmaster base plate kit, is that we're going to get a very concealed look when we're driving around town and we're not hooked up. There's going to be a spring-loaded pin here on either arm. We'll pull that out and away, and then we can rotate in either direction to remove the arm completely. Go ahead and do that on the other side as well. And then we have a few more things to unhook here, such as your safety cables, your electrical connector, and then finally your breakaway switch. So this is how it's going to look when we're driving around town. We're not hooked up to our vehicle, or we're not hooked up to our motorhome. As you can see here, everything has a very nice, sleek, finished install look. So taking a closer look at everything, number one, here are the insertion tabs for our removable arms, and those are pretty much recessed behind the outer face of the bumper here. They do kind of stick out from this portion here, so they are going to be a little visible, but to be honest, if you really didn't know what you were looking for, you wouldn't assume that this vehicle really has anything aftermarket installed on the front. It is a very factory-like finish. The only thing that does extend out from the bumper are the safety chain loops, and that's actually pretty critical because you want to make sure that you're not scratching your bumper by hooking up your safety chains. Therefore, having that extension there is going to protect your vehicle nicely. If they were recessed back in there, it's going to be a lot harder to hook onto, and you risk scratching up the paint. So it's actually quite nice that those extend a little bit. And then everything has a nice durable black powder coated finish, which is going to help protect the metal underneath from rust and corrosion. And it's also going to, again, help it blend in with the vehicle better. Now these two components you see over here, the electrical connector and the breakaway switch, those don't actually come with the base plate kit, but Roadmaster does provide links for these. So they actually have two little standoff tabs here that you can mount the trailer connector to, and then there's also a standoff tab there that you can mount a breakaway switch to. So it's really nice that they integrate those into their base plate kit because they know you're going to need those to flat tow your vehicle, and a lot of the times it's really hard to find a place to mount these things on the vehicle. So having that integrated into everything is going to make a nice convenient installation for you. So now when we're ready to hook everything back up, it's going to be pretty much the same steps we just showed you, but in reverse. So that was real time there. It's just that simple. Shouldn't take you guys long at all to get it unhooked from the motorhome or hook it back up. So in regards to the installation of this base plate kit, it's really not that bad at all. I've installed several base plate kits before, and this one is pretty straightforward. There's really not a lot of modifying to the vehicle. You really don't have to cut any metal or drill into it. There is going to be some trimming to the bumper, but most of that is actually going to be behind the scenes, and it's kind of unavoidable for a base plate kit on this vehicle. So if you're looking for one, I really think the Roadmaster is an excellent option. It's probably a little bit easier to install than some of the other options out there, at least from my personal experience. You could find yourself just needing common hand tools. So most basic starter toolkits are going to allow you to get this job done. You will need a torque wrench, and if you don't have that, you can actually rent this from most local auto parts stores for free. But with that being said, let's go ahead and pull it into the shop and show you how to install it. So the first step of our installation, we need to open up the hood on our vehicle. We're going to be coming inside here. So we have 4 screws we need to remove to start. We're going to have one here, and then the same 2 on the other side. So we're going to use a 10mm socket to remove those. So next we need to come inside the wheel well on either side, and we're going to have several of these push pin fasteners that we need to remove. So there's going to be quite a few along the outside edges and then one tucked back up there as well. So we need to remove these all. In order to remove them, you're going to take a flathead screwdriver and you're just going to pry out that center section, and then the bottom section should come out with it. So we've got that one out. We have several more of these, and we need to do this on both sides. So once we get all those fasteners removed, we're going to peel back on our fender liner here. So I'm going to peel out to about here, and then I'm going to take a rolled up paper towel, and I'm going to be smushing it sort of back behind the fender between that liner there to give us a little bit more room to work. And then we're going to take the fender liner fabric, and you're going to be peeling that down, back and away, just sort of tucking it behind the tire for now. So the reason we need to peel back that fender liner is because we're going to have a couple bolts that are basically attaching our quarter panel to our bumper fascia. Now these bolts are very hard to see. I actually can't even see them at all. I just had to get them out by feel. But basically they're going to be coming down upwards. So basically if we just kind of picture the bolt like this, you can see there's one at the very top here that's just going to screw through these 2 panels and attach them, and there's going to be one down here. So you're going to have 2 of these to remove on either side. In order to get them out, I'm taking a small 1/4 inch ratchet with a 10mm deep well socket, and I was able to get those in there pretty easily to get those fasteners out. So we need to go ahead and do this on both sides. So over here on the passenger side, once you do that same thing, you get those 2 screws out, get that fender liner peeled back. We do have a larger electrical connector we need to unplug. So what we're going to do is, there's going to be a tab in the center of there you're going to depress, and then that's going to allow you to slide this handle down. And when you slide this down, this is actually just going to release the 2 connectors here. You may still need to pull them apart, but that's basically how it's done. So next we're going to come underneath the vehicle here, and we have this little splash shield that we have some fasteners securing this to the vehicle. So we need to remove those fasteners. There's going to be 5 of them on each side, 3 up here, 2 on the bottom. We'll remove these with a T30 Torx bit. Next, we're going to have a couple more screws, 2 on each side. We'll remove those with a 7mm socket. So now we're ready to remove our bumper fascia. So in order to do this, we're going to start on either side, and we're going to be pulling down, because what we're looking for in the center here is a plastic clip. So we're going to take a thin screwdriver here. I am using a metal screwdriver, but I have it taped up so we're not damaging the paint. But we're just going to pull down, and then I'm going to use my screwdriver to release that clip. So now with an extra set of hands, we'll go ahead and remove the bumper fascia from the vehicle. You do kind of have to pull out on the top there, and then we'll just find a safe place to set this aside so it doesn't get damaged. So now that we have our fascia off, we need to remove this little air dam deflector. So on either side, we're going to have a push pin fastener. And once you get those off, you're going to have some clips on the top here, so you need to remove those. And on the bottom, we have a couple more of those clips. But once we get all those out, it should just pop right off. So on certain models, we're going to have another device over here on the driver's side. So if you guys do have this one that's pictured here, you're just going to take an 8mm socket and remove that screw there. Once we get it unbolted, we do have an electrical connector there. So you'll depress that tab and pull straight out, and we'll just set this aside. And then we're going to have a clip here attaching it to the radiator housing. So just go ahead and release that, pull it out to give you a little bit more room to work. Next, we're going to come up here to our computer. You're going to use a 10mm socket, and you're going to remove that nut there. And then you're going to push the computer off the bracket out and away. So next, we're going to be removing the lower radiator support here. There's going to be 2 bolts. We'll need to remove those with a 13mm socket. And we also need to remove this nut on the frame up there with a 15mm socket. So we need to do this on both sides. Go ahead and get it done now. Now we're going to come over here to the passenger side in this area. So if you have a plug-in hybrid model, there's some additional lines and fittings you need to unconnect over here. So just make sure to reference that in your instructions, but our model is not, therefore we don't need to worry about that. We can proceed to the next step. So on either side of the vehicle here, we need to do some trimming on this black plastic shroud. So you can kind of see I have the yellow paint marker. Basically, we're just going to be flushing this up to the side of the housing. So that rib there needs to come out, as well as this here, and then we will stop about this point up here. So go ahead and use your tool of choice to remove this material from either side here. You can use a Dremel tool or one like you see here. So once we have everything shaved on both sides, we're going to take our side-specific mounting bracket. It looks like this. Make sure you reference your instructions so you know you have the correct side, but we're just going to go ahead and set this into position like so. So this here is going to go over our factory stud, and it should sit on there pretty nicely. And we're going to secure it using the factory hardware. So you remember that nut we removed earlier from that stud? We're going to place it back on there, but I'm going to place some Loctite on that before I place the nut on. Just going to turn that a couple times to secure it. And then our 2 bolts on the bottom there. Again, these are the factory hardware that we removed. We need to make sure we place some Loctite on those before we reinstall them. So now that we have our brace in position, we're going to press it towards the outside of the vehicle as far as it can go, and then we're going to snug up and torque our hardware to the specifications in your instructions. So now that we have the driver's side on, we'll just repeat those same few steps over here on the passenger. So we've got the passenger side brace installed here. We want to turn our attention now to the very back leg of this brace. You can see that hole there from the factory. So in your kit, you're going to get a 1/2-inch hex nut along with a 1/2-inch split lock washer. We're going to place that over the bolt and then place on some red Loctite. And then we're going to take our wire nut that comes in your kit. You're going to place a small bend on that. We're going to place this through that top hole there in the frame, and then we're going to line it up with the hole there on the back side, and then we'll begin threading this in. Now that we have our bolt started, I'm going to take a 3/4 inch socket, snug it down. And now we'll come back with our torque wrench and torque that bolt down to the specifications in your instructions. And once we're done, we're going to go ahead and snap this off. Now there's a couple different ways to do that. One, you can kind of work them back and forth and they'll eventually break, or you could just simply cut them. But once we have this side done, just repeat that same process over on the other side. So keep in mind, there are 2 different size bolts in your kit. We have the longer ones here, and we have the shorter ones. The shorter 1.25-inch ones are the ones we're going to be using for this brace on the outside. Now next, we're going to be remounting our computer. So go ahead and just bend this bracket, align the stud there with the hole, and replace with your nut. So next thing we need to do is we need to trim our air dam shield here. So you can see we have it marked out on either side in accordance with the instructions. So we're just going to take one of our tools of choice and remove that material there so we can reinstall it on the vehicle. I use some scissors to cut the rubber flaps, and then I'm going to come back with this oscillating tool here to cut out the plastic. You can use a Dremel, or perhaps just some heavy duty shears would probably work for this as well. And now that we have it trimmed, we'll go ahead and throw it back on the vehicle. So the next thing we'll be trimming is this device here, which we removed over on this side of the vehicle earlier in installation. So again, this isn't on every model. You may or may not have this, but if you do need to make a small cut there, which you can see we have outlined in yellow. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that now. So now once we have this trimmed, we are going to go ahead and plug it back in to our wiring harness. And then we are going to mount this to this little tab here on our base plate kit, just like so. So in your kit, you're going to get the hardware you need to do this. It's these 1/4-inch bolts. And I'm going to stick the bolt head side through the back of it just to make it a little bit easier. And then I'll just secure it here, placing that flat washer over there, and our nut. And once we have it on there, we're going to use a 10mm and an 11mm socket and wrench to tighten it down. So now we're going to take our base plate assembly here, go ahead and set it onto the vehicle on these outside brackets with those 3 holes. So the base plate is going to go on the outside of this bracket, and then you're going to secure them with your 1/2-inch bolts. Make sure you got a flat washer over there, and they're just going to install like that. So let's go ahead and get that into position now. So once we get our bolts in there holding everything together, I'm going to come back with some red Loctite, and then we're going to secure them using a 1/2-inch split lock washer and then a 1/2-inch hex nut. So now that we have 1 bolt on each side sort of holding our base plate up, we'll go ahead and just install your remaining fasteners. So now that we have all of our hardware loosely installed, we're going to come back with a 3/4-inch socket and wrench and snug everything up. Now we'll come back with our torque wrench here and torque everything down to the specifications in your instructions. So the next thing we need to do is we need to come over here to our bumper fascia because we need to trim a couple holes on either side to allow for clearance of our base plate kit. So if we look in here, you're going to see I have a yellow mark made. So in your instructions, they're going to give you a distance to measure over and then a distance to measure down. Then we're going to make that mark. And then once we have that, we're going to come back with our hole saw here with our pilot bit in there. We're just going to go ahead and remove that material. So before we drill on the passenger side, there is an ambient temperature sensor that's going to be pretty much just directly behind where we need to drill that hole. So we want to flip the bumper over, remove that wire from the back side of the bumper, and then you can proceed to drilling your hole. So we've got our bumper flipped over here, and you can see how we just relocated our ambient temperature sensor. It's normally attached down here. We just pried that off and then zip tied it here to the wiring harness up above there. And then at this time, I went ahead and cleaned out the holes that we drilled. I just took a razor knife there to get all those burrs off there. If you have a file or some sandpaper, you can use that as well. So now once we have that sensor removed, we actually need to do some trimming to the inside of your bumper fascia. So here's where that sensor was attached. We need to go ahead and trim this off. You can see our yellow cut lines here, as well as over here. Now this is on the passenger side. We need to do some trimming on the driver's side as well, but it will be a little bit different. And on either side, you will have one of these screws you need to remove. But once we've done that, we'll go ahead and cut through that plastic. Keep in mind, you want to make very careful that you're only cutting through this top layer here and you're not cutting down into the plastic below it. And over on the driver's side, as we said, here's the trimming that's required, although it's not as much as the passenger. So you can see we got that material removed there, and once you remove that material on either side, you're going to have your screw mount. You need to go ahead and cut that off as well, so just make that flush with that bracket there. So now that we have all of our trimming done on the bumper fascia, we can go ahead and reinstall it back onto the vehicle here using the reverse order of the steps that we showed you earlier. Now, if you're installing anything else for your flat toe setup, such as a braking system or the wiring, now's a good time to go ahead and knock that out. That way you have a little bit more room to work. But if not, again, you can just go ahead and reinstall the bumper. So now that we have everything secure, we'll go ahead and throw our bumper back on the vehicle using the reverse order from the steps that we removed it. It's going to do it today for our look and installation of the Roadmaster Crossbar-style base plate kit here on a 2022 Ford Escape.